The highway stretched endlessly before Emma's old sedan, a ribbon of cracked asphalt cutting through the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest. Rain had been threatening all afternoon, dark clouds gathering like bruises across the October sky, but she'd pressed on anyway. The research position at the university in Port Angeles was too important to miss, even if it meant driving through what the weather reports were calling unseasonable atmospheric disturbances. Emma Chen had never been one to let fear dictate her choices. 26 years old, freshly minted PhD in mycology, and finally, landing a position that would let her study the fungal networks of old-growth forests. Her entire academic career had been building toward this. A little rain wasn't going to stop her. Except this wasn't a little rain anymore. The first drops hit her windshield like bullets, heavy and urgent. Within seconds, the drizzle transformed into a deluge so thick her wipers couldn't keep pace. Emma leaned forward, squinting through the windshield as the world dissolved into sheets of gray water. "Come on," she muttered, knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Just a few more miles." Thunder rolled across the sky, so deep and resonant she felt it in her chest. The radio had dissolved into static an hour ago, right around the time her phone signal had died. She was somewhere in the Olympic National Forest, she knew that much. The GPS had quit working 20 minutes back, leaving her with nothing but her own sense of direction and an increasingly useless paper map. Lightning split the sky, branching like white-hot veins across the clouds. In that moment of brilliant illumination, Emma saw something that made her breath catch. The road ahead simply ended, not in construction barriers or warning signs, but in a massive fallen tree, its ancient trunk blocking both lanes completely. She slammed on the brakes. The sedan hydroplaned, sliding sideways across the wet asphalt. Emma's stomach lurched as the car spun, the world wheeling around her in a dizzying blur of green and gray. She cranked the wheel hard, fighting for control, her heart hammering against her ribs. The car finally stopped, perpendicular across the road, engine still running. Emma sat frozen, hands trembling, breath coming in sharp gasps. The rain hammered on the roof like 1,000 fists demanding entry. "Okay," she whispered to herself. "Okay, you're okay." But she wasn't okay. She was stranded in the middle of nowhere, with night falling fast, and a storm that showed no signs of stopping. The fallen tree was easily 4 feet in diameter, ancient Douglas fir or cedar. She couldn't tell in this rain. There was no way her little sedan could go over or around it. Emma pulled out her phone. No signal. She tried anyway, holding it up, moving it around the car like some kind of technological divining rod. Nothing. Another crack of thunder shook the car. This one felt different. Wrong somehow. The sound wasn't just loud. It seemed to resonate in her bones, in the base of her skull. The lightning that followed wasn't the usual bright white, but had an odd greenish tinge that left afterimages dancing across her vision. The wind picked up, buffeting the car so hard it rocked on its suspension. Branches flew past, torn from trees she couldn't even see. This wasn't just a storm anymore. This was something else entirely. Emma had grown up in Seattle, was familiar with Pacific Northwest weather and all its moody variations. But this felt primal, ancient, like the earth itself was angry. She couldn't stay in the car. The way the wind was picking up, the way debris was flying through the air, it wasn't safe. She needed shelter, real shelter. Grabbing her jacket from the passenger seat, Emma made a split-second decision. She'd seen a break in the trees about a quarter-mile back, what might have been a trail or old logging road. In weather like this, there might be a ranger station, or at least some kind of structure where she could wait out the storm. She killed the engine, pocketed her keys and phone, and pushed open the door. The wind immediately tried to rip it from her hands. Rain slammed into her face, cold and stinging. Within 3 steps, she was completely soaked, her jacket doing absolutely nothing to keep out the water. Emma turned back the way she'd come, head down against the wind, one arm up to shield her face. The forest pressed in on both sides of the road, dark and impenetrable. Trees that had stood for centuries groaned and swayed, their crowns disappearing into the storm-black sky. Lightning flashed again, that same eerie greenish color. In its brief illumination, Emma saw the opening she'd remembered, a narrow gap between two massive cedar trees, what looked like a trail leading into the forest. Every instinct screamed at her not to go into the woods. Stay on the road. Wait for help. But as another violent gust nearly knocked her off her feet, Emma knew she had no choice. She couldn't survive out here in the open. She plunged into the forest. The canopy provided some shelter from the rain, but it came at a cost. Darkness. The trail, if it even was a trail, was barely visible. Emma pulled out her phone and activated the flashlight, the small beam seeming pathetically inadequate against the vast blackness. The forest felt different in here, older. The trees were massive, their trunks wider than her car, their bark thick and furrowed with age. This was old growth, the kind of forest that had stood long before humans arrived in the Pacific Northwest, the kind that held secrets in its soil and shadows. Emma pushed forward, stumbling over roots and rocks she couldn't see. The wind howled through the canopy above, and somewhere in that sound, she could have sworn she heard something else. Something that almost sounded like voices, or howling, or singing, probably just her imagination, her mind trying to make patterns out of chaos. Time became elastic. She couldn't tell if she'd been walking for 10 minutes or an hour. Her clothes were plastered to her skin, heavy with water. Her shoes squelched with each step. She was shivering now, not just from fear, but from genuine cold. Another flash of lightning, brighter this time, illuminating the forest in stark relief. And there, maybe 50 yards ahead, a structure, a cabin. Emma's heart leaped. Shelter. Safety. She broke into a stumbling run, phone light bouncing wildly, desperate to reach it before the darkness swallowed it again. The cabin materialized out of the storm like something from a dream. It was larger than she'd expected, built from massive logs that had weathered to a deep gray. The roof was steeply pitched, designed to shed heavy snow. There were no lights in the windows, no smoke from the chimney, no vehicles nearby. It looked abandoned. Emma didn't care. Empty was fine. Empty was perfect. She just needed to get out of this storm. She stumbled up onto the covered porch, and the relief from the rain was so immediate and profound she actually gasped. The wind still howled around her, but here, under the porch roof, she could finally breathe without inhaling water. Emma tried the door. Locked, of course. She knocked anyway, pounding on the heavy wood with her fist. "Hello? Is anyone here? I need help." No answer. Just the storm and the creaking of the cabin's timbers. She tried the windows, but they were all secured, covered from the inside with what looked like heavy shutters. Whoever owned this place had locked it up tight. Another massive thunderclap shook the forest. Emma made her decision. She'd apologize later, would pay for any damages, would explain to whoever owned this place. But right now, she needed to get inside before hypothermia set in. There was a stack of firewood on the porch, protected under an eave. Emma grabbed a log, hefted it, and swung it at the door handle. Once, twice. On the third try, something cracked. She threw her shoulder against the door, and it burst inward. Warmth hit her immediately. Not the warmth of a fire, but the warmth of a place sealed against the cold. Emma stumbled inside and pushed the door closed behind her, leaning against it, chest heaving. The cabin was dark, but not completely. Some ambient light filtered through gaps in the shutters, enough for her eyes to begin adjusting. The space was larger than it had seemed from outside. One main room with a massive stone fireplace dominating one wall, a kitchen area, and what looked like doors leading to other rooms in the back. And it wasn't abandoned. Not at all. The furniture was well maintained, expensive looking, heavy wooden pieces that matched the cabin's rustic aesthetic, but with clean lines that suggested they were modern, not antique. There were books on shelves, carefully arranged. A thick rug covered the floor in front of the fireplace. This was someone's retreat, their sanctuary, kept pristine and ready for use. "Hello?" Emma called out again, more tentatively this time. Her voice sounded small in the space. "I'm sorry for breaking in. The storm, I didn't have anywhere else to go." "Hello?" Silence. No response, no movement. If anyone was here, they weren't answering. Emma's teeth were chattering now, her body shaking uncontrollably. Hypothermia. She was actually at risk of hypothermia. She needed to get out of these wet clothes, needed to get warm. She found a bathroom, thank God, with actual plumbing that still worked. There were towels in a cabinet, thick and soft and perfectly folded. Emma stripped off her soaked clothes, dried herself roughly, trying to generate some heat through friction. In another cabinet, she found what looked like spare clothes. A man's flannel shirt, enormous on her, but warm and dry. She pulled it on, rolling up the sleeves. It smelled like cedar and something else. Something wild and earthy she couldn't quite identify. Back in the main room, Emma assessed her situation. The fireplace was laid with wood and kindling, clearly prepared for use. She found matches on the mantel. Within minutes she had a fire going, the flames catching and spreading, filling the cabin with flickering light and blessed warmth. She dragged one of the heavy chairs closer to the fire and collapsed into it, holding her hands out to the flames. The heat was almost painful against her frozen skin, but she didn't care. She was safe. She was warm. She was alive. Outside, the storm raged on, but in here, the cabin felt like a fortress, solid, secure, protected. Emma's eyes grew heavy. The adrenaline that had kept her going was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. She knew she should stay alert, should try to figure out where she was and how to contact help. But the fire was so warm, the chair so comfortable, and she was so tired. Just for a minute, she told herself. Just a few minutes of rest, and then she'd figure out what to do next. Her eyes drifted closed. She didn't see the door at the back of the cabin, slightly ajar. Didn't notice the way the shadows seemed deeper in that direction, more substantial. Didn't hear the soft sound of breathing, slow and measured, coming from that darkness. Didn't know that she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life, or perhaps her salvation. In the back room, in a space Emma hadn't explored, something massive lay in the darkness. Its fur was the color of midnight, so black it seemed to absorb what little light reached into the room. The creature was enormous, easily the size of a small bear, with paws that could crush bone and jaws that could tear through flesh like paper. But it wasn't moving. It was sleeping, had been sleeping for hours, would continue sleeping until dawn. This was the one night of the lunar cycle when it was vulnerable, when the transformation couldn't be controlled, when sleep was absolute and unavoidable. The king of the lycanthropes reduced to this, a wolf in slumber, helpless as a pup, protected only by the sanctity of this place and the ancient laws that made it forbidden ground to all his kind. And Emma Chen, human, ordinary, oblivious, had just violated those laws. The fire crackled. The storm howled. Emma slept by the hearth, unaware. And in the darkness, the wolf's ear twitched at the sound of her breathing. Dreams stirred in its ancient mind, dreams of prophecy and fate, of bonds that could save or destroy kingdoms. Slowly, as the hours passed and midnight approached, the wolf's breathing began to change. Its massive chest rose and fell with increasing frequency. The muscles beneath its fur rippled and shifted. Dawn was coming, and with it, everything would change. Emma's last conscious thought before sleep claimed her completely was how strange it was that the cabin smelled like wolf, like the wild things that ran through forests under the moon, like danger and freedom, and something her hindbrain recognized as predator. But she was too tired to care, too cold to question it. Outside, the storm reached its crescendo. Lightning painted the forest in strobe light flashes. Thunder shook the earth, and somewhere in the distance, carried on the wind, came a sound that might have been wolves howling, or might have been something far more ancient, far more aware, singing a warning that Emma Chen could not hear. She slept on, by the fire, in the forbidden cabin, having crossed a threshold she didn't know existed. And in the back room, the wolf's eyes opened. They were not the yellow eyes of a natural wolf. They were amber, shot through with gold, ancient and intelligent and utterly aware. They fixed on the doorway, on the flickering firelight beyond, on the scent of the human who had dared enter this sacred space. The wolf didn't move, couldn't move, not yet. The night's hold was still strong, the vulnerability still present, but dawn was coming fast, and with it, the transformation. And then there would be a reckoning. The last piece of wood Emma had placed on the fire crackled and split, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. In her sleep, she smiled slightly, some dream bringing her momentary peace. She had no idea that her life, Everything she thought she knew about the world was about to shatter like glass. The storm raged on, the fire burned low, the wolf watched and waited, and the night slowly, inexorably, gave way to dawn. Dawn came not with gentle light, but with silence. The storm that had raged through the night died as abruptly as if someone had thrown a switch. The wind ceased its howling. The rain stopped its relentless assault. Even the thunder, which had shaken the very foundations of the earth, faded into memory. Emma stirred in the chair by the fireplace, her neck stiff from the awkward angle she'd slept in. The fire had burned down to embers, glowing softly in the gray morning light that filtered through gaps in the shutters. She blinked slowly, her mind foggy, trying to remember where she was. The cabin, the storm, breaking in. She sat up quickly, wincing as her muscles protested. Her clothes, the borrowed flannel shirt, were warm and dry now, a stark contrast to the soaked garments she'd discarded in the bathroom. The events of the previous night came rushing back. The fallen tree, the desperate flight into the forest, finding this place. "Hello?" she called out, her voice hoarse from sleep. "Is anyone here? I need to explain." "You need to explain nothing." Emma's heart stopped. The voice came from behind her, from the direction of the back rooms. It was male, deep and resonant, carrying an authority that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. It wasn't angry, exactly, but it was cold, controlled, dangerous. She spun in the chair, and for a moment her mind couldn't process what she was seeing. A man stood in the doorway to the back room, and calling him merely handsome would have been a criminal understatement. He was tall, easily 6'4", with broad shoulders and a lean, muscular build evident even through the simple black shirt he wore. His hair was dark, almost black, and long enough to brush his shoulders. His face was all sharp angles and strong lines, with high cheekbones and a jaw that looked carved from granite. But it was his eyes that truly arrested her. They were amber, a deep golden color that seemed to catch and hold the light, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel pinned in place like a butterfly on a board. I'm sorry," Emma stammered, gripping the arms of the chair. "The storm. I was stranded. I didn't know where else to go. I'll leave right now. I'll pay for the door. You'll leave when I permit it." He moved into the room with a fluid grace that seemed almost inhuman, each step deliberate and controlled. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Emma stood up, backing away instinctively. Something about him set off every alarm bell in her nervous system. Flight response. Prey, recognizing predator. "I broke into your cabin," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm sorry. It was an emergency. But I'm leaving now. You broke into more than my cabin." He stopped about 10 feet away from her, and she could see now that he wasn't quite as calm as his voice suggested. There was tension in every line of his body, a coiled readiness that suggested he could move with explosive speed if he chose. "You violated sacred ground. You entered the king's sanctuary on the night of his vulnerability. Do you understand the magnitude of what you've done?" "King's sanctuary?" Emma's scientific mind tried to make sense of his words. Was this some kind of private property dispute? Some rich eccentric who thought he owned the forest? "Look, I don't know what you're talking about. I was caught in a storm. I needed shelter. I didn't see any no trespassing signs." His laugh was harsh, without humor. "No trespassing signs. As if human laws apply here." Human laws? Emma's confusion was giving way to irritation. She'd had a terrifying night, had nearly died of hypothermia, and now this man was speaking to her in riddles and acting like she'd committed some unforgivable crime. What other kind of laws are there? He moved closer, and Emma's irritation vanished, replaced by pure instinctual fear. There was something in the way he moved, something that reminded her of the wolves she'd seen in documentaries. Efficient, powerful, absolutely confident in their ability to bring down prey. "Laws older than your civilization," he said quietly. "Laws written in blood and bone and the turning of the moon. Laws that state, unequivocally, that no one may enter this place on the night of the full moon. And you, human, have broken them." "I didn't know," Emma started, but he cut her off. "Ignorance is not innocence." He was close enough now that she could see the gold flecks in his amber eyes, could smell that same wild scent that had clung to the shirt she wore, cedar and earth and something indefinably wild. By ancient law, the penalty for what you've done is death. Emma's blood turned to ice. You're insane. Am I? He tilted his head, studying her with those unsettling eyes. Tell me, Emma Chen. Yes, I know your name. I can smell it on your driver's license in your pocket. Tell me what you think you're dealing with here. What rational explanation does your scientific mind provide for a man who speaks of ancient laws and death penalties? A dangerous lunatic, Emma said, though her voice shook. Someone who's going to let me walk out that door right now because assaulting someone is actually illegal under real laws. Walk out the door, he repeated, something like amusement flickering across his face. By all means, try. Emma didn't need to be told twice. She moved toward the door, giving him a wide berth, her heart hammering. Her hand closed on the door handle. She pulled. The door didn't budge. She pulled harder, then pushed, then pulled again. Nothing. It was as if the door had been sealed shut, as if it had become part of the wall itself. What did you do? She demanded, spinning to face him. How did you lock it? I didn't. He moved to one of the windows and opened the shutters, flooding the room with gray morning light. Look outside, Dr. Chen. Tell me what you see. Emma rushed to the window, desperate to understand what was happening. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. The forest surrounding the cabin was filled with wolves. Not just a few, dozens of them, maybe 100 or more. They sat in a massive circle around the cabin, perfectly still, perfectly silent. Every one of them had their eyes fixed on the structure, waiting with the patience of predators who knew their prey couldn't escape. But it was impossible. Wolves didn't behave this way. They didn't gather in groups this large, didn't sit in organized formations, didn't watch and wait with such obvious intelligence. What? Emma's voice failed her. My people, the man said quietly. My pack. They know what you've done. They're waiting for me to deliver the sentence that law demands. Emma's mind was reeling. Your people? Your pack? What are you talking about? He turned to face her fully, and in the morning light she could see things she'd missed before. The way his pupils were slightly elongated, more oval than round. The way his canine teeth were just a fraction too long, too sharp. The way he moved with a grace that was more animal than human. My name is Kieran, he said. Kieran Ashbourne, king of the Lycanthropes of the Western Territories. And you, Dr. Emma Chen, have committed the gravest violation of our laws by entering my sanctuary on the night of my vulnerability. Lycanthropes, Emma whispered. Her scientific training warred with what she was seeing, what she was hearing. You mean werewolves? You're saying you're werewolves? We prefer lycanthrope, Kieran said dryly. Werewolf is such a pedestrian term, loaded with Hollywood nonsense. But yes, that's what I'm saying. Emma laughed. She couldn't help it. It was either laugh or scream, and laughing seemed like the better option. This is ridiculous. Werewolves don't exist. You're either completely insane, or this is some elaborate prank, or I'm still unconscious in my car, and this is all a hypothermia-induced hallucination. Kieran's expression didn't change. You're a scientist. You believe in evidence. Very well. What happened next would be burned into Emma's memory for the rest of her life. Kieran's form began to shift. It wasn't the dramatic Hollywood transformation, all screaming and bone-breaking and agony. It was fluid, almost graceful, like watching water change state. His body rippled and reformed, bones restructuring, muscles reshaping, fur sprouting across skin. In less than 10 seconds, where a man had stood, there was now a wolf. But not just any wolf. This creature was massive, easily twice the size of any natural wolf, with fur so black it seemed to absorb light. Its eyes, those same amber eyes, regarded her with obvious intelligence as it sat back on its haunches. Emma's back hit the wall, her legs gave out, and she slid down to the floor, unable to look away. Every scientific principle she'd ever learned, every rational thought she'd ever had, shattered like glass. The wolf, Kieran, watched her for a long moment. Then he shifted again, flowing back into human form with the same impossible ease. He was still fully clothed. Apparently, whatever magic or biology was involved in the transformation, dealt with such mundane concerns. "Still think you're hallucinating?" he asked quietly. Emma couldn't speak, couldn't think. Her entire worldview had just been demolished and rebuilt in the space of seconds. Kieran moved closer and crouched down in front of her, bringing himself to eye level. "Breathe, Dr. Chen. Hyperventilating won't help anyone." She realized she was gasping, her breath coming in short, sharp pants. With effort, she forced herself to slow down, to breathe more deeply. Her scientific training kicked in. A panic attack would serve no purpose. She needed to think, to understand, to survive. "Good," Kieran said, something that might have been approval in his voice. "You adapt quickly. That may save your life." "Why?" Emma swallowed hard. "Why are you going to end my life? I didn't know. I didn't know any of this existed." "Because law isn't about knowledge. It's about consequence." Kieran stood and walked to the fireplace, staring into the dead embers. Once per lunar cycle, for a single night, the king of the lycanthropes is vulnerable. On that night, we cannot control the transformation. We must sleep in wolf form, completely unconscious, utterly defenseless. It's our greatest weakness. He turned back to her, and she could see the weight of centuries in his eyes. "This cabin, this ground, is sacred, because it's the only place where the king can be truly safe on that night. Ancient laws older than any human government, forbid anyone from entering this territory on the full moon. The penalty for violation has always been death, because to allow anyone to know where the king sleeps, when he sleeps, is to invite assassination, to invite war." "But I didn't know," Emma protested. "I wasn't trying to hurt you. I wasn't trying to do anything except not die in a storm." "Intent doesn't matter." Kieran's voice was hard again. "The law exists to protect the kingdom. If I show mercy to you, I demonstrate weakness. Other packs, other territories will see it as an invitation to challenge my authority. My own people may question whether I'm fit to lead." "So, you're going to end me to maintain your political position?" Emma found anger cutting through her fear. "That's barbaric." "It's survival," Kieran countered. "It's how we've remained hidden from humanity for millennia. It's how we've avoided the wars and persecution that would surely come if your kind knew we existed." "My kind?" Emma pushed herself to her feet, using the wall for support. "You mean humans? The ones you apparently live among, pretend to be? Don't talk to me about barbarism when you're talking about taking someone's life for accidentally seeking shelter." Something flickered across Kieran's face. Surprise, maybe, or respect. "You're braver than I expected. Most humans who learn what we are either cower or run. I can't run. You've made that clear." Emma crossed her arms, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. "And I won't cower. If you're going to end me for something I didn't know was wrong, at least let me face it with dignity." Kieran studied her for a long moment, his amber eyes searching her face. "Why were you on that road? In that storm?" The question caught her off guard. "What? Humor me. Why were you traveling through the Olympic forest in October alone, driving into what was clearly going to be a dangerous storm?" Emma hesitated, unsure where he was going with this. "I got a research position at the university in Port Angeles. I'm a mycologist. I study fungi." "The Olympic Peninsula has some of the most interesting fungal networks in North America, and I've been trying to get a position here for years. I wasn't going to let a little rain stop me." "A mycologist." Something changed in Kieran's expression, though Emma couldn't read what it meant. "You study the connections between living things, the networks that bind forests together, that allow trees to communicate and share resources." "Yes," Emma said slowly, "the mycelial networks. Some people call it the Wood Wide Web. But what does that have to do with—" "Everything," Kieran interrupted. He began to pace, his movements restless, agitated. "Everything and nothing. The timing is too perfect. The storm that drove you here, that wasn't natural weather, Dr. Chen. That was summoned. That was magic, old magic, the kind we use to protect our territories and confuse humans who get too close." "You caused that storm?" Emma's voice rose. "You nearly ended me with that storm." "I didn't cause it," Kieran said sharply. "It's automated, triggered by the full moon, designed to keep humans away from this area. But it should have turned you back, should have made you afraid to continue. Instead, it drove you directly here, to me, on the one night when such a thing should have been impossible. He stopped pacing and fixed her with those intense amber eyes. Do you believe in fate, Dr. Chen? I believe in science, Emma shot back. In cause and effect, in rational explanations. And yet here you stand, in a cabin full of werewolves. Excuse me, lycanthropes. Having witnessed a transformation that shouldn't exist according to your science. Kieran moved closer. Sometimes the universe has a pattern, Dr. Chen. Sometimes things happen for a reason. What reason could there possibly be for this? Emma demanded. Kieran was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost uncertain, the first time he'd shown any hint of doubt. 3 months ago, my sister began having visions. She's our pack's seer, born with the ability to glimpse possible futures. She saw a human woman entering this cabin on the night of my vulnerability. She saw that woman's arrival as a fulcrum point, a moment when everything could change. Change how? Emma whispered. She couldn't see that clearly. The future fractured in her vision, splitting into dozens of possible paths. But in every version where I followed the law, where I carried out the sentence for your intrusion, he paused, and Emma saw something like pain cross his face. In every version where I do what I'm supposed to do, my kingdom falls. War comes. My people are destroyed. Emma's mind was racing. And in the versions where you don't? Where you spare me? Some end in the same destruction. Some end in salvation. And some, Kieran met her eyes, some show possibilities I don't understand. Bonds that shouldn't exist. Changes to the very nature of what we are. So what are you saying? Emma asked. That you're going to spare me because of some vision. I'm saying I don't know what to do. For the first time, Kieran looked less like a king and more like a man facing an impossible choice. The law is clear. My duty is clear. But the prophecy is equally clear. Following the law leads to ruin. He walked to the window again, looking out at the assembled wolves. My people are waiting for me to emerge with your body. They're waiting for me to uphold the law that has protected us for thousands of years. If I walk out there with you alive, I'll have to explain why. I'll have to justify breaking our most sacred rule, and some of them won't accept it. Who? Emma asked. Who won't accept it? My brother, for one. Kieran's voice turned bitter. Marcus has wanted my position for decades. He believes I'm too cautious, too willing to hide from humanity rather than dominate them. If I show mercy to a human, he'll use it as proof that I'm unfit to lead. He'll challenge me, and others will follow. Then tell them about the prophecy, Emma suggested. If your sister is respected, if her visions are believed. It's not that simple. Kieran turned back to her. Prophecies are tricky things, Dr. Chen. They show possibilities, not certainties. The simple act of knowing about a prophecy can change whether it comes true. If I tell my people that I'm sparing you because of a vision, some will say I'm trying to manipulate fate, trying to choose my own path rather than accepting what the universe provides. He moved closer, and Emma noticed for the first time how tired he looked, how much weight he seemed to be carrying. For 2 centuries, I've been king of the Western Territories. For 2 centuries, I've made decisions that protected my people, kept them safe, kept them hidden. I've followed the law, upheld tradition, been exactly what a king should be. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And now, for the first time, I don't know what the right choice is. Emma realized something in that moment, something that terrified her almost as much as the wolves outside. Her life wasn't the only thing hanging in the balance. The choice Kieran made would ripple out, affecting hundreds or thousands of lives. And he was looking at her as if she might somehow have the answer. I can't tell you what to do, she said quietly. This isn't my world. I don't understand your laws or your politics. But I can tell you this. I'm not your enemy. I'm not a threat. I'm just someone who got lost in a storm and made a mistake. A mistake with consequences, Kieran reminded her. Everything has consequences, Emma countered. Every choice, every action. You taught me that yourself just now. So the question isn't whether there will be consequences. It's which consequences you can live with. Kieran stared at her for a long moment. Then suddenly he smiled, a real smile. not the cold expression he'd worn before. "You're either very brave or very foolish, Dr. Chen. Probably both," Emma admitted. "My advisor used to say I had more courage than sense." The moment was broken by a howl from outside, deep and resonant, and clearly meant as a summons. Kieran's expression hardened. "That's Marcus. He's getting impatient." He looked at Emma, and she saw the decision crystallizing in his eyes. "I'm going to do something that may save you or may doom us both. Are you willing to trust me?" "Do I have a choice?" "Not really," Kieran admitted. "But I'd prefer you cooperate rather than fight me." "What are you going to do?" "Claim you," Kieran said simply. Emma blinked. "Claim me? What does that mean?" "There's one exception to the law forbidding entry to this sanctuary. If a human is blood bonded to the king, if they're under the king's direct protection, they have the right to be here. It's an ancient provision, designed for human servants and allies in the times before we went into hiding." "So you're saying you'll—" "What? Pretend I'm your servant?" "Not servant. Something more binding." Kieran's gaze was intense. "I'll claim you as my intended mate." Emma's jaw dropped. "Your what?" "It's the strongest bond in our culture," Kieran explained quickly. "An intended mate has rights that supersede almost everything else. If I claim you're my future queen, then your presence here becomes justified, protected. No one can challenge it without challenging me directly." "But that's a lie," Emma protested. "We don't even know each other. 5 minutes ago you were talking about following the law that demanded my death." "I know," Kieran said, "but it's the only option that keeps you alive and gives me political cover. The bond doesn't have to be real, not at first. It just has to be public. We can figure out the rest later." "The rest?" Emma's voice was faint. "What rest?" "How to keep you safe while we determine what the prophecy actually means. How to prevent my brother from using this situation to start a civil war. How to—" Another howl, closer this time, more insistent. "We're out of time," Kieran said urgently. "I need an answer, Dr. Chen. Will you accept my claim? Will you play the role of my intended mate, at least until we can find a better solution?" Emma's mind was whirling. This was insane. All of it was insane. Werewolves and prophecies and ancient laws, and now a fake engagement to a man, a lycanthrope, she'd met less than an hour ago. But the alternative was death. And despite everything, despite the fear and confusion and overwhelming strangeness of it all, Emma wanted to live. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll accept your claim." Kieran nodded once, sharply. "Then stay close to me. Don't speak unless I tell you to. And whatever happens, don't show fear. My people respect strength. Show them any weakness, and they'll use it against both of us." He moved to the door and placed his hand on it. Immediately, it swung open, the seal that had held it broken by his touch. "One more thing," he said, glancing back at her. "This is going to change your life completely, Dr. Chen. Nothing will ever be the same." "Are you certain?" Emma thought about her research position, her carefully planned career, the normal life she'd been driving toward just yesterday. All of it seemed impossibly distant now, separated from her by an unbridgeable chasm. "I'm certain," she said, though her voice shook. Kieran held out his hand. Emma took it, feeling the warmth of his skin, the strength in his grip. Together, they stepped out of the cabin and into a world Emma had never known existed, a world of ancient magic and primal power, of prophecies and bonds that defied explanation. The wolves waited in their circle, hundreds of eyes fixed on the cabin door, and as Kieran led Emma out onto the porch, as the morning sun broke through the clouds, she realized that her old life was truly over. Whatever came next would be something entirely new, something dangerous and impossible, and utterly beyond her control. Kieran's hand tightened on hers, and Emma squeezed back, the only anchor she had in a suddenly unrecognizable world. The story was just beginning. The silence that fell over the forest as Emma and Kieran stepped onto the porch was absolute. 100 wolves, perhaps more, sat in their perfect circle, every eye fixed on the two figures emerging from the cabin. Emma could feel the weight of their collective gaze like a physical pressure against her skin. Kieran's hand remained firmly clasped around hers, his grip warm and steady. He stood tall, projecting an authority that seemed to radiate from him like heat from a fire. This was a king facing his subjects, and despite everything, Emma found herself drawing strength from his presence. One wolf in the circle stood. It was massive, nearly as large as Kieran had been in his wolf form, with fur the color of storm clouds and eyes of pale blue ice. As Emma watched, the transformation rippled through it, that same fluid, impossible shift from wolf to human. The man who emerged was striking in a cold, dangerous way. He shared Kieran's height and build, though his hair was lighter, more brown than black. His features were similar enough that Emma immediately understood who he was before Kieran even spoke. "Marcus," Kieran said, his voice carrying easily across the clearing. "You summoned me." "I summoned the king," Marcus replied, his voice sharp with barely contained anger. "What I see is a king who has forgotten his duty." His ice-blue eyes fixed on Emma with undisguised hostility. A human, alive, emerging from the sanctuary on the morning after the full moon. "Would you care to explain this violation of our most sacred law, brother?" Emma felt every instinct screaming at her to let go of Kieran's hand, to step back, to make herself small and invisible. But she remembered his words. Show no weakness. She forced herself to stand straight, to meet Marcus's gaze without flinching, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "I will explain," Kieran said calmly. "But first, you will show respect. You address your king, Marcus. Remember your place." A ripple went through the assembled wolves, some shifting their weight, others making small sounds in their throats. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he inclined his head slightly. "Of course, my king. I await your explanation for why you've chosen to violate the law that has protected our people for 3,000 years. Kieran's thumb moved gently across the back of Emma's hand, a small gesture of reassurance that no one else would notice. "I have violated nothing," Kieran announced, his voice ringing with authority. "Dr. Emma Chen entered this sanctuary not as a trespasser, but as one who has every right to be here. I claim her as my intended mate. She is under my protection, bonded to me by right of ancient law. Her presence here is justified and legal." The effect of his words was immediate and dramatic. The wolves erupted into sound, howls, barks, and the peculiar vocalizations that Emma was beginning to understand were their way of communicating. Several more began to shift into human form, men and women emerging from wolf shape with expressions ranging from shock to anger to confusion. Marcus's face went completely white, then flushed with rage. "You're what?" "My intended mate," Kieran repeated, pulling Emma closer to his side. "Bonded under the provisions of the Old Covenant, which states that any human bearing the king's claim has the right to enter sacred ground. The law you're so concerned about protecting has an exception, Marcus, and I've invoked it." "This is madness!" Marcus took a step forward, his hands clenching into fists. "You expect us to believe that you've chosen a human as your mate? You, who have refused every suitable lycanthrope female in the Western Territories for 2 centuries? You, who claimed you would never take a mate because it would create political complications?" "I expect you to believe what I tell you," Kieran said coldly. "I am your king. My word is law. Your word is only law if we accept it." Marcus's voice rose. "You're asking us to accept that this human, this scientist who studies mushrooms, is somehow worthy of being our queen? That she has any right to know about us, to be among us, to carry our secrets?" Emma felt something shift inside her, the fear giving way to indignation. She might be out of her depth, might be terrified and confused, but she wasn't going to stand here and be talked about like she was invisible. "I have a name," she said clearly, before she could stop herself. Every eye in the clearing fixed on her. Kieran's hand tightened on hers, whether in warning or support, she couldn't tell. "I have a name," Emma repeated, forcing her voice to remain steady. "It's Emma, Dr. Emma Chen, and while I may not understand all of your customs or laws, I understand enough to know that talking about someone as if they're not present is disrespectful in any culture." Marcus's eyes widened, then narrowed dangerously. "The human speaks. How charming. Tell me, Dr. Chen, are you truly so arrogant as to think you have any say in matters that have nothing to do with you?" "They have everything to do with me," Emma shot back. "You're debating whether I should be alive or not. That seems pretty relevant to my interests." A sound rippled through the crowd, something that might have been laughter, quickly suppressed. Marcus's face darkened further. "She has spirit," a new voice said. A woman stepped forward from the circle of wolves, still in wolf form, but clearly different from the others. Her fur was silver-white, and her eyes were the color of moonlight. Perhaps that's what drew our king's attention. The wolf shimmered and transformed, revealing a woman who appeared to be in her 60s, though Emma suspected age might mean something different for lycanthropes. Her silver hair fell in waves around her shoulders, and despite her apparent age, she moved with the same fluid grace as the others. "Lyra," Kieran said, and Emma heard relief in his voice. "You've seen this." "I've seen many things," Lyra replied, her voice soft but carrying easily across the clearing. "The question is, which version of events will come to pass?" "The seer speaks in riddles as always," Marcus said dismissively. "Visions are nothing but possibilities. They're not justification for breaking our most sacred laws, aren't they?" Lyra moved closer, her moonlight eyes studying Emma with an intensity that made her want to squirm. "If the visions show that following the law leads to our destruction, shouldn't we consider alternatives?" "So she told you about her visions," Marcus accused Kieran. "You're making decisions based on the fevered dreams of—" "Careful, brother," Kieran's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. "You're about to insult our most respected seer. Think very carefully about your next words." Marcus took a breath, visibly controlling himself. "Forgive me, Lyra, but you must understand how this looks. Our king claims a human as his mate on the very night she violates our sanctuary. It's too convenient. It looks like he's using the mate bond as an excuse to avoid his duty. Perhaps," Lyra said thoughtfully, "or perhaps the universe has a sense of timing that we don't understand." She turned to Emma. "Child, do you know why you were on that road last night?" Emma blinked at the question. I was driving to Port Angeles for a research position. And why that particular route? Why not take the highway along the coast, which would have been faster and safer?" "The GPS sent me that way," Emma said slowly, trying to remember. "It said there was construction on the coastal route. It rerouted me through the forest." "Was there construction?" Lyra asked. Emma opened her mouth, then closed it. I don't know. I didn't check. I just followed the GPS. Technology can be influenced," Lyra said quietly. "Magic can whisper to machines, guide them to make certain choices. The storm that drove you here, it was summoned to keep humans away. But what if it was also summoned to bring one specific human to us? What if the universe itself conspired to put you in that cabin on that night?" "That's absurd," Marcus protested. "You're saying fate wanted this human to violate our sanctuary? Why? To what purpose?" "That," Lyra said, "is what we need to discover." She looked at Kieran. "You've made your claim. The question now is whether the pack will accept it." "The pack will accept what I decide," Kieran said firmly. "Will they?" Marcus stepped forward, and Emma saw several other wolves move with him, a coordinated action that spoke of planning an alliance. "The law is clear, brother. The penalty for entering the sanctuary is death. You're asking us to ignore that law, to accept a human among us based on a claim of bonding that appeared conveniently after she violated sacred ground. You're asking us to trust that this isn't just you avoiding a difficult decision." "I'm not asking," Kieran said, his voice hard as stone. "I'm telling you, as your king, that Emma Chen is under my protection. Anyone who challenges that challenges me directly. Then I challenge you." The words fell into the clearing like stones into still water, sending ripples of shock through the assembled lycanthropes. Kieran's entire body went rigid. "What did you say?" "I challenge you," Marcus repeated, louder now, his voice carrying to every wolf in the circle. "Under the ancient right of succession, I challenge your right to rule. You've shown weakness. You've broken sacred law. You've allowed your judgment to be compromised by attachment to a human. You're unfit to lead the Western territories." Emma felt Kieran's hand trembling slightly in hers. Not with fear, she realized, but with rage barely held in check. "You would start a war over this?" Kieran asked quietly, dangerously. "I would save our people from a king who's forgotten what it means to lead," Marcus shot back. "How long before you compromise other laws? How long before you expose us all because you're too attached to this human to do what needs to be done?" "The challenge is issued," Lyra said, her voice cutting through the tension. By law, it must be answered within 3 days, at the next gathering of the pack. Until then, both challengers must refrain from violence against each other. I know the law, Kieran said through gritted teeth. Do you? Marcus smiled coldly. Then you know what happens if you lose. The human dies, regardless of any claims you've made, and you lose your throne. Everything you've built for 2 centuries, gone in a single night. He turned to address the assembled wolves. In 3 days, we'll see whether Kieran Ashbourne is truly fit to lead us. Until then, think carefully about what kind of king puts a human stranger above the laws that have kept us safe for millennia. With that, Marcus shifted back into wolf form and loped off into the forest. Several other wolves followed him. Emma counted at least 20, leaving the circle noticeably depleted. The remaining lycanthropes looked uncertain, some still in wolf form, others having shifted to human. They looked to Kieran, waiting for his response, for some sign of what they should do. Kieran took a breath, and when he spoke, his voice was calm again, controlled, showing no sign of the rage Emma had felt trembling through his hand. Return to your homes, he commanded. Speak to your families. Consider what you've heard. In 3 days, we will gather at the Grand Assembly grounds, and this challenge will be settled according to our laws. Until then, no one is to approach Dr. Chen with hostility. She is under my protection, and anyone who harms her will answer to me personally. The wolves began to disperse, some shifting and leaving as humans, others running off through the trees in their wolf forms. Within minutes, the clearing was empty, except for Kieran, Emma, and Lyra. The moment they were alone, Kieran's shoulders sagged slightly. He released Emma's hand and ran his fingers through his hair, a gesture of frustration that made him seem suddenly more human, more vulnerable. That went well, he said sarcastically. It went exactly as I saw it would, Lyra said quietly. Marcus has been planning this for months. He was simply waiting for an opportunity. Emma's arrival gave him the excuse he needed. Emma's legs felt weak. What? What just happened? What did he challenge you to? A fight, Kieran said bluntly. A formal challenge for leadership. We'll fight in front of the entire pack, and whoever wins becomes king. And if you lose? Emma asked, though she already knew the answer. If I lose, Marcus becomes king, and the first thing he'll do is execute you for violating sacred law. Kieran's amber eyes met hers. I'm sorry, Dr. Chen. I've made your situation considerably more complicated. More complicated? Emma felt a hysterical laugh bubbling up. Yesterday, I was a scientist driving to a new job. Today, I'm engaged to a werewolf king who has to fight his brother in a supernatural duel or I die. I think we've passed complicated and entered some entirely new category of absurd. Lycanthrope, Kieran corrected automatically. Not werewolf. Oh, forgive me, Emma said, her voice rising. I'll make sure to use the correct terminology when my impossible situation gets me ended by a pack of magical creatures that shouldn't exist. Emma, Kieran started. No! She pulled away from him, pacing across the porch. This is insane. All of it is insane. I can't process this. I can't. She stopped, her breath coming fast, the reality of everything crashing down on her at once. The fear she'd been holding back since waking up rushed through her like a flood. Lyra moved closer, her expression gentle. Breathe, child. I know this is overwhelming. Overwhelming? Emma's voice cracked. I'm going to die because I got lost in a storm. That's not overwhelming. That's nightmare logic. You're not going to die, Kieran said firmly. I won't let that happen. Can you promise that? Emma demanded. Can you promise you'll win this fight? Kieran was quiet for a moment too long. That's what I thought, Emma whispered. Marcus is strong, Kieran admitted. He's been training for this for decades. But I've been king for 2 centuries. I didn't get this position by being weak. But you could lose, Emma pressed. You could die, and then I die, and your whole kingdom falls into chaos. All because I made one wrong turn. Not one wrong turn, Lyra interjected. Don't you see? This was always going to happen. Marcus has been waiting for an excuse to challenge Kieran. If it wasn't you, it would have been something else. Your arrival simply accelerated the inevitable. That's supposed to make me feel better? Emma asked incredulously. It's supposed to help you understand that this isn't your fault, Lyra said gently. You're a catalyst, not a cause. There's a difference. Emma wanted to argue, wanted to reject the idea that she was somehow meant to be here, caught up in supernatural politics that could get her ended. But before she could speak, Lyra continued. There's something you should know, the seer said, looking between Emma and Kieran. Something I saw in my visions that I haven't shared with anyone. What? Kieran asked warily. The bond you claimed, the mate bond. It's not entirely false. Emma's heart skipped. What do you mean? Lyra's moonlight eyes seemed to see through Emma, past her skin and bone to something deeper. There's a thread between you two. It's faint, barely formed, but it's there. The universe has been weaving it for longer than either of you realize. Your meeting in that cabin wasn't just chance or magic. It was recognition. Recognition of what? Kieran demanded. Each other, Lyra said simply. You were meant to meet, meant to bond. The how and why, those details are still unclear to me, but the connection is real, even if neither of you understand it yet. Emma felt dizzy. That's impossible. We just met. You can't just bond with someone you don't know. Can't you? Lyra smiled softly. Haven't you felt it? That sense of familiarity when you look at him? That strange certainty that he won't hurt you, even though by all logic you should be terrified? Emma opened her mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come, because Lyra was right. Despite everything, despite the fear and confusion and absolute insanity of the situation, some part of her did trust Kieran, had trusted him from the moment she'd looked into his amber eyes. This is why the prophecy is so complex, Lyra continued. Because your bond could save the kingdom or destroy it. It depends on the choices you both make in the next 3 days. 3 days, Kieran repeated hollowly. 3 days to prevent a civil war, prove that my claim is legitimate, and somehow convince my people that bonding with a human is what's best for everyone. And to train, Lyra added. Marcus has been preparing for this fight. You'll need to be ready. I'm always ready, Kieran said. But Emma heard the doubt underneath his words. Lyra turned to Emma. And you, child, have decisions to make as well. You can't remain ignorant of our world if you're to be part of it. You need to understand what you've entered, what your role might be. My role? Emma asked. I don't have a role. I'm just trying to survive. Survival is a role, Lyra said. But I think you're meant for more than that. The question is whether you're brave enough to discover what. Before Emma could respond, a sound echoed through the forest. A long, mournful howl that raised the hairs on the back of her neck. Kieran's expression darkened. That's the warning call. Something's wrong. Another howl joined the first, then another, building into a chorus of alarm. What's happening? Emma asked. I don't know, Kieran said, already moving toward the edge of the porch. But it's coming from the eastern border. That's where the rogue pack has been causing problems. Rogue pack? Emma repeated. Lycanthropes who've rejected the authority of the territories, Lyra explained quickly. They've been attacking humans, breaking our most important law. Stay hidden. Kieran has been trying to stop them for months. If they're attacking now, while the pack is divided, Kieran's face was grim. Marcus's challenge couldn't have come at a worse time. Or it came at exactly the right time, Lyra said darkly. Marcus has always been sympathetic to the rogues' philosophy. What if he's coordinating with them? My brother wouldn't, Kieran started, then stopped. Actually, I don't know what he would or wouldn't do anymore. More howls. Closer now, more urgent. I have to go, Kieran said, turning to Emma. Stay here. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone but me or Lyra. Wait, Emma grabbed his arm. You're just going to leave me here? Alone? I'll stay with her, Lyra said. Go, Kieran. Your people need you. Kieran looked torn, his eyes moving between Emma and the forest where the howls were coming from. Go, Emma said, surprising herself. Do what you need to do. I'll be fine. Something flickered in Kieran's eyes. Gratitude, maybe, or respect. He reached out and cupped her face gently in his hand, the gesture so unexpected and intimate that Emma's breath caught. I will keep you safe, he promised quietly. No matter what happens, I will keep you safe. Then he was gone, shifting into his massive black wolf form mid-leap off the porch, racing toward the sounds of alarm with a speed that seemed impossible. Emma stood frozen, her face still warm where he'd touched her, watching until he disappeared into the trees. "Well," Lyra said calmly, "shall we go inside? We have much to discuss, and very little time to discuss it." Emma followed her into the cabin, her mind reeling. Through the window she could see the sky darkening again, not with natural storm clouds this time, but with something else. Something that looked almost like smoke, but moved with too much purpose to be natural. "What is that?" she asked. Lyra's expression was grave. "Trouble. The kind that suggests Marcus isn't the only threat we're facing." She moved to the fireplace and began building up the fire, her movements quick and efficient. "Tell me, Emma Chen, how much do you know about curses?" "Curses?" Emma repeated faintly. "As in magical curses? Is there another kind?" Lyra's voice was dry. "Sit down, child. If you're to understand what's really happening here, you need to know the full story. The story of why Kieran's people are so protective of their secrets. The story of why a human bonding with the king is both our greatest hope and our most terrifying nightmare." Emma sank into the chair by the fire, her legs finally giving out. 3,000 years ago, Lyra began, the lycanthropes made a choice that would shape our destiny forever. We chose to hide from humanity, to live in secret, to suppress our true nature. And in making that choice, we invoked a curse, one that grows stronger with each generation, one that could destroy us all. She looked at Emma with those eerie moonlight eyes. "And you, Dr. Emma Chen, might be the key to breaking it, or the catalyst that makes it consume us completely." Outside, the darkness continued to spread across the sky, and in the distance, the sound of fighting, snarls and screams and the terrible symphony of violence, echoed through the forest. The blood moon was rising, both literal and metaphorical, and Emma was caught in the center of a storm far more dangerous than the one that had driven her here. The cabin door shuddered in its frame, though there was no wind. Lyra's expression tightened. "It's beginning," she whispered. "The convergence. Everything that was prophesied, all coming together at once." "I don't understand any of this," Emma said, her voice small. "You will," Lyra promised. "Before the next 3 days are over, you'll understand everything. The question is whether that knowledge will save you or destroy you." The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and somewhere in the forest, Kieran fought for his people, unaware that the battle he was fighting was only the beginning. The real war was just about to start. The Grand Assembly grounds were ancient beyond reckoning, a natural amphitheater carved into the mountainside where the earth itself seemed to pulse with old magic. Stone pillars marked the cardinal directions, covered in symbols Emma couldn't read but somehow felt in her bones. 3 days had passed since Marcus's challenge. 3 days of preparation and revelation that had fundamentally altered Emma's understanding of reality. Lyra had been true to her word. She'd taught Emma everything: the history of the lycanthropes, the curse that bound them, the delicate balance they maintained between their human and wolf natures, and the prophecy, the complete prophecy. When the Lost One enters the king's refuge on the night of his weakness, the ancient curse will face its final test. Blood must answer blood. Choice must answer fate. Only through the bond of 2 worlds can the children of the moon find freedom or face extinction. Emma stood beside Kieran at the edge of the assembly grounds, watching as hundreds of lycanthropes gathered, not just from the Western territories, but from packs across North America. News of the challenge had spread fast, and everyone wanted to witness this moment. "Are you ready?" Emma asked quietly. Kieran's amber eyes were fixed on the center of the grounds where Marcus waited, surrounded by his supporters. "Ready as I'll ever be." He wore simple clothes, dark pants and a shirt that would tear away easily during the transformation. Marcus was dressed similarly, his ice blue eyes burning with anticipation across the distance. "Remember what Lyra said," Emma whispered. "This isn't just about strength. It's about proving the bond is real." Kieran turned to her, and Emma saw something in his expression that made her heart skip. Not just determination, but something deeper. Something that had been growing between them over the past 3 days. "Emma," he said softly, "if this goes wrong—" "It won't," she interrupted firmly. We've come too far. The past 3 days had been a revelation in more ways than one. Lyra had explained the curse that bound the lycanthropes, a magical constraint that grew tighter with each generation, slowly crushing their ability to maintain balance between their two natures. Younger lycanthropes were being born unable to control their transformations, driven mad by the conflict between human mind and wolf instinct. And the cause? An ancient choice, made 3 millennia ago when the lycanthropes decided to hide from humanity completely, to sever all bonds with the human world. That severing had created an imbalance, a wound in the natural order that festered over centuries. The cure, according to prophecy, was equally simple and impossible. A true bond between a lycanthrope king and a human, freely chosen by both, strong enough to bridge the divide between their worlds. Emma had spent 3 days learning to understand that bond, to feel the thread that connected her to Kieran. It had been there all along, Lyra insisted, waiting to be acknowledged. And as Emma had opened herself to it, she'd felt something extraordinary, a connection that transcended logic, that made her aware of Kieran's presence even when he wasn't in sight, that let her sense his emotions like ripples in still water. "It's time," Lyra announced, materializing beside them. Her silver hair caught the afternoon light as she placed a hand on Emma's shoulder. "Remember, child, the bond must be proven before the pack. They must witness it, feel it, believe it. Only then will they accept you. And if they don't?" Emma asked. "Then Kieran fights alone, and Marcus wins by default." Lyra's moonlight eyes were grave. "The bond is everything now." Kieran took Emma's hand, and she felt that now familiar pulse of connection, stronger than ever. "Together?" he asked. "Together," Emma confirmed. They walked into the assembly grounds, and silence fell like a blanket over the gathered lycanthropes. Hundreds of eyes tracked their movement as they approached the center where Marcus waited with barely concealed impatience. An elderly man in ceremonial robes stood between them, the arbiter, Lyra had called him, the neutral party who would oversee the challenge. "Kieran Ashbourne," the arbiter's voice rang out, "you stand challenged for your right to rule the Western Territories. Marcus Ashbourne claims you have shown weakness, violated sacred law, and compromised your judgment through attachment to a human. How do you answer?" "I answer that I have followed the law perfectly," Kieran said, his voice carrying to every corner of the grounds. "I have invoked the ancient right of mate bonding, which allows a human under the king's protection to enter sacred ground. There is no violation, a convenient excuse," Marcus sneered. "A false bond, created to avoid consequences." "Not false," Emma said, stepping forward. Every eye swiveled to her, and she felt the weight of their attention like physical pressure. "The bond is real. The human speaks," Marcus said mockingly. "Tell me, Dr. Chen, how much did my brother pay you to play this role? What promises did he make to secure your cooperation?" "He promised to keep me alive," Emma replied steadily, "which you would not have done. But the bond isn't about survival anymore. It's about truth." She turned to address the assembled lycanthropes, her scientific mind organizing her thoughts even as her heart raced. "Lyra told me about the curse, about how your people are dying, slowly losing the ability to balance your dual natures. She told me the prophecy, that only a bond between your world and mine could break it. I didn't believe her at first. I'm a scientist. I believe in evidence." Emma took a breath, feeling Kieran's presence beside her like an anchor. "But I've felt the bond. I've learned to recognize it, and I understand now what it means, not just for Kieran and me, but for all of you. You've been hiding from humanity for so long that you've forgotten how to exist in balance with us. That isolation is killing you, generation by generation." "Isolation keeps us safe," someone shouted from the crowd. "Does it?" Emma challenged. "How many of your children can't control their transformations? How many of your young go mad from the conflict between their natures? How long before the curse consumes you completely?" Murmurs rippled through the assembly. She'd struck a nerve. The curse was clearly a topic of deep concern. Marcus's face darkened. "You know nothing of our struggles, human. You've been among us for 3 days and think you understand millennia of history? I understand science," Emma countered. "I understand systems and balance and what happens when an ecosystem becomes isolated. You've cut yourselves off from a vital part of what you are, the human part, and it's destroying you. The bond she speaks of is real. Lyra's voice cut through the murmurs. The seer moved to stand beside Emma and Kieran, her presence commanding instant attention. I have witnessed it growing over these 3 days. It is not a political convenience. It is fate manifesting. Fate, Marcus spat. Or manipulation. Lyra, you've always supported my brother. Your word is not neutral. Then let the pack decide, the arbiter interjected. The challenge was issued. By law, it must be settled through combat. But, he paused, looking thoughtful. The mate bond claim adds complexity. If the bond is proven genuine before witnesses, then Dr. Chen's presence in the sanctuary was indeed legal, and there is no violation to answer for. How can a bond be proven? Marcus demanded. She could simply lie. They could both lie. Bonds can be tested, Lyra said quietly. There is a ritual, ancient and dangerous, that reveals the truth of connections between souls. If Kieran and Emma undergo the ritual and the bond proves false, then Emma must answer for her violation. If the bond proves true, then my claim stands, Kieran finished, and there is no basis for the challenge. Marcus's expression turned calculating. A ritual that could expose them as frauds? Very well. I accept these terms. Wait, Emma whispered to Kieran. What ritual? What does it involve? I don't know, Kieran admitted quietly. But we don't have a choice. If we refuse, it looks like we're hiding something. The arbiter nodded solemnly. The ritual of true seeing will be performed. Lyra, as our seer, you will conduct it. Prepare the ceremonial space. The next hour passed in a blur of preparation. A circle was drawn in the center of the assembly grounds using what Lyra called moon dust, a silvery powder that seemed to glow with its own light. Candles were placed at specific points, and Lyra chanted in a language that predated any Emma had ever studied. The ritual will reveal the truth of your connection, Lyra explained to them quietly. It will make the bond visible to everyone here. Its strength, its nature, its authenticity. But be warned, it will also make you vulnerable to each other in ways you may not be prepared for. You'll feel everything the other feels. Every fear, every doubt, every hidden truth. Will it hurt? Emma asked. That depends on how honest you've been with yourselves, Lyra said cryptically. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the assembly grounds, Emma and Kieran were led to the center of the circle. They stood facing each other, hands clasped, while hundreds of lycanthropes watched in absolute silence. Are you ready? Kieran asked, his amber eyes searching hers. Emma thought about everything she'd learned, everything she'd felt over the past 3 days. The bond was real. She knew that now. But would it be strong enough to prove itself to this gathering? Would it be enough to save them both? I'm ready, she said. Lyra began to chant, her voice rising and falling in complex patterns. The moondust circle began to glow brighter, and Emma felt a pulling sensation, as if something was being drawn from deep inside her chest. Then Kieran gasped, and Emma felt it too. The bond, suddenly visible and tangible between them. It appeared as threads of light, golden and silver intertwined, stretching from her heart to his. But these weren't simple threads. They were complex, layered, beautiful beyond description. And through them, Emma felt everything. She felt Kieran's fear, not of the fight with Marcus, but of failing his people, of being unworthy of the crown he'd carried for 2 centuries. She felt his loneliness, the weight of leadership that had kept him isolated from true connection. She felt his surprise at meeting her, his confusion at the bond, his growing certainty that she was exactly what he'd been missing without knowing it. And she felt his determination, absolute and unshakable, to protect her, no matter the cost. The experience was overwhelming. Emma's knees buckled, but Kieran held her steady, and through the bond, she felt him experiencing her in return. He felt her fear of the unknown, her scientific mind struggling to accept a reality that defied everything she'd been taught. He felt her determination to survive, her refusal to be a victim. He felt her loneliness, too, the isolation of being brilliant in a world that often resented brilliance, of spending years focused on career while relationships withered. And he felt her choice, her conscious decision, made somewhere during these 3 days, to trust him, to believe in the bond, to accept that sometimes the universe had patterns that transcended logic. The threads of light between them pulsed and grew stronger, fed by their mutual recognition and acceptance. Emma realized she was crying, tears streaming down her face, but she couldn't look away from Kieran's eyes. The bond is true. Lyra's voice seemed to come from very far away. Witness it, all of you. This is not fabrication or convenience. This is fate recognized and accepted. This is the bridge between worlds that the prophecy foretold. Gasps rippled through the assembled lycanthropes. Even Marcus stood frozen, staring at the visible manifestation of the bond with something like shock on his face. But then his expression hardened. A bond may be real without being beneficial, he said coldly. The prophecy could as easily lead to our destruction as our salvation. I maintain my challenge. The king has compromised his judgment, regardless of whether the bond is genuine. Then, the challenge stands, the arbiter declared. Combat will commence at moonrise. The light faded as Lyra ended her chanting. The bond became invisible again, but Emma could still feel it thrumming inside her, stronger than ever. He won't let this go, Emma whispered. No, Kieran agreed. Marcus wants power more than truth. We'll have to settle this the old way. As the moon began to rise, a perfect full moon, blood red on the horizon, the assembly grounds transformed. The gathered lycanthropes formed a circle, creating a natural arena. Marcus and Kieran moved to opposite sides, beginning the rituals of preparation. Emma stood with Lyra at the edge, her heart pounding as she watched Kieran remove his shirt, revealing the scars of previous battles across his muscled back. There's something you need to know, Lyra said quietly. Something I haven't told anyone. What? Emma asked, unable to look away from Kieran. The prophecy has a second part. One I kept hidden because I wasn't sure I understood it correctly. Lyra's voice was grave. It says, when blood answers blood beneath the crimson moon, the bond will be tested by fire and shadow. Only if the human proves worthy to stand in both worlds will the curse break. Otherwise, all will fall. Emma's stomach dropped. Worthy? How am I supposed to prove I'm worthy? I don't know, Lyra admitted, but I think we're about to find out. The arbiter raised his hands. Let the challenge begin. Combat will continue until one party yields or can no longer fight. By our ancient laws, let this matter be settled. Both Kieran and Marcus shifted simultaneously, their transformations swift and seamless. Two massive wolves faced each other across the circle, one black as midnight, one gray as storm clouds. They circled slowly, looking for openings, and even Emma could see the deadly grace in their movements. Then Marcus lunged. The fight was brutal and swift. Marcus was strong, his attacks calculated and vicious. But Kieran was faster, more experienced, his defensive moves speaking of centuries of combat knowledge. They crashed together in the center of the circle, a whirlwind of fur and fangs. Emma watched, her hands clenched, feeling through the bond every hit Kieran took, every surge of pain and determination. It was agonizing and terrifying, but she couldn't look away. Marcus broke away, circling again, and Emma saw blood on his muzzle. But Kieran was bleeding too, a gash along his shoulder that looked serious. They came together again, harder this time. Marcus drove Kieran backward, snapping at his throat, trying to end it quickly. But Kieran twisted away, his counterattack catching Marcus's leg, sending him sprawling. The gray wolf recovered quickly, but there was a limp now, a weakness. Kieran pressed his advantage, driving his brother back toward the edge of the circle. And then Emma felt it. A wrongness in the air, a disturbance that made her skin prickle. Through the bond, she felt Kieran sense it too, his attention wavering for just a second. It was enough. Marcus lunged, catching Kieran off guard, driving him to the ground. His jaws closed around Kieran's throat, not crushing yet, but in perfect position to deliver a fatal strike. Yield! Marcus's voice emerged from the wolf's throat, gravelly and strange. Yield, brother, and I'll let you live in exile. Through the bond, Emma felt Kieran's response, an absolute refusal to yield, a willingness to die rather than surrender his people to Marcus's rule. And she felt the moment Marcus's jaws began to close. No! The word tore from Emma's throat as she ran forward, breaking through the circle of watchers. She heard Lyra shouting behind her, heard gasps from the assembled lycanthropes, but she didn't stop. She couldn't explain what she was doing or why. She only knew that she couldn't stand by and watch Kieran die. Not when the bond between them was real, was everything, was the only thing that made sense in this impossible world. Emma threw herself between the two wolves, her hands reaching for Marcus's massive head, pulling with all her strength. She knew it was futile. She was human, fragile, powerless against creatures like these. But she had to try. "Stop," she screamed. "Please stop." Marcus's jaws released Kieran, his wolf form shifting in surprise as he backed away. Kieran staggered to his feet, bleeding, and Emma felt his shock through the bond. Shock and something else. Pride, love. And in that moment, everything changed. The bond between them exploded outward, visible not just as threads of light, but as a wave of energy that washed over every lycanthrope in the assembly. Emma felt it happening, felt herself becoming something more than just human, felt Kieran becoming something more than just lycanthrope. They were bridge, connection, balance. The curse, that ancient weight that Lyra had described, shattered like glass. Emma felt it breaking, felt the release that rippled through every lycanthrope present. For the first time in 3,000 years, they were free. Marcus shifted back to human form, staring at Emma with something like awe. "What? What did you do?" "She proved herself worthy," Lyra's voice rang out, filled with triumph and tears. "She stood between worlds. She risked everything for love, for the bond, for truth. The prophecy is fulfilled." Emma sank to her knees beside Kieran, who had shifted back to human form. Blood still seeped from his wounds, but he was alive, was looking at her with those amber eyes full of wonder. "You shouldn't have done that," he whispered. "You could have been hurt." "I couldn't let you die," Emma said simply. "The bond, it's real, Kieran. It's everything." He pulled her close, and Emma felt the rightness of it, the completion. Around them, the assembled lycanthropes were experiencing their own revelation. The younger ones were laughing and crying, feeling for the first time the balance between their natures. The curse that had been slowly destroying them was gone. Marcus stood alone, watching the scene with an expression that cycled through shock, anger, and finally, grudging acceptance. "The challenge is over," the arbiter declared. "Kieran Ashbourne has proven his worth, and more. He has fulfilled the prophecy. The bond is accepted. Emma Chen is recognized as his mate and future queen." The assembly erupted in howls, not of challenge this time, but of celebration. The curse was broken. Their people were saved. As the sun set completely and the blood moon rose in its full glory, Emma stood beside Kieran before his people, no longer just a lost scientist who'd stumbled into the wrong cabin, but a bridge between worlds, a queen of two peoples. "I never wanted this," she whispered to him. "Neither did I," Kieran admitted, his arm around her waist. "But sometimes the universe knows what we need better than we do." Emma looked out at the celebrating lycanthropes, at Lyra, who was smiling through her tears, even at Marcus, who was slowly, reluctantly, bowing his head in acceptance. Her old life was gone, the research position, the careful career plan, the world she'd understood. But in its place was something far more extraordinary, a connection that transcended species, a purpose that mattered, and a love that had been written in the stars long before either of them had been born. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now?" Kieran smiled, and Emma saw hope in his eyes for the first time. "Now we figure out how to build a world where both our peoples can thrive, together." The moon hung overhead, red and full and beautiful, blessing the union of two worlds that had been separated for far too long. And Emma Chen, scientist and queen, mycologist and bridge builder, knew that her greatest work was just beginning. The storm that had brought her here seemed like a lifetime ago. But as Kieran's hand found hers and their bond sang between them, Emma understood that sometimes the wrong turn leads exactly where you're meant to be. The prophecy was fulfilled, the curse was broken, and dawn was rising on a new world, one where wolves and humans could finally stand together.